Hey, Wendy.
Hi. So one of the things that you were talking about was the Dakota pipeline, and it made me start to think about a comment that I'd made a long time ago that basically was questioning, how can we get people on the left or the right to be concerned with issues if they interrupt the economic stability, I guess you could say, or continued stability of the wealthy. And one of the things that was successful, if we think about maybe social issues, right? So issues of maybe LGBT marriage and things like that, or I should say gay and lesbian marriage, was to get the corporate side on board. And I think that really helped sort of reduce the stigma of same-sex marriage, and then brought a lot of people on board who, under normal circumstances, the previous circumstances, would not have considered themselves pro-gay marriage. So I'm wondering, is there, I mean, if you have any suggestions or anyone, but it's something I think about all the time, is there a way to get corporate support behind issues that are that do involve economic issues and that do involve economic changes, and how that can be done? And is that perhaps the only way that we're ever going to see any real fundamental change if we have, oddly, the side, like the corporate side on our side? So just kind of a question I was thinking of, and that's all. Thanks.
How do we get corporate support around economic issue to change? That's going to be a long-term strategy. I think there maybe are some companies, we can look at the models of some companies, but I think that's because that maybe having that more open-minded, community-centered focus is actually at the core values of the company. It could mean like getting a strategy together in terms of the shareholders. I mean, I know in a lot of cases, like economic decisions are made based on shareholders, but at the same time, if people, we talk about boycotts, economic boycotts as one way. I really do think that if anyone was going to economic boycott strategy to kind of get companies or corporate entities to kind of bend, be more considerate and concerned about not just economic engagement and development, but just overall community engagement and corporate I lost the word, but corporate governance, positive, productive, forward moving corporate governance. I think that you need to have a collaborative effort, not just an economic boycott. I mean, economic boycotts are effective, definitely, but they're more short term effectiveness. We're talking about long term changes being made overall. I don't know if anyone's seen the Walmart commercials where it's they're like, well, yeah, we care about our Walmart family, and we make sure you go to school, and we make sure this, and we're trying, and we're going to try to raise wages. And I'm just like, this commercial probably would never exist if it wasn't for all of the heat that Walmart is constantly being placed under, the pressure on them to do better. They're still not there. But I do think that when we have continued targeted, so maybe if there were certain companies, like I was talking with my daughter earlier, we were talking about how when for example, with the different companies are giving tax breaks and stuff. No, actually, it wasn't my daughter. It was one of my friends from law school. My daughter is so like grown sometimes. I feel like I'm talking to one of my colleagues. But we were just talking about how in places where you give corporations these big, tax breaks, for example, to come and they promise all these jobs or whatever, but then the jobs never materialize, or they just up and leave and go someplace else. There needs to be something built into those agreements. And then some people will say, well, why would corporations agree to them if they weren't to their benefit? But at the same time, if we have concerted action over, several places versus this race to the bottom, it seems like for corporate development and economic engagement, if we had a different mentality in how we were engaging and started training people maybe on how to take part in these conversations, then maybe we would start seeing, better outcomes. Maybe, and so instead of seeing, what was it? I think it was the factory, and maybe it was Indiana, and they were saying, well, we'll stay if you agree to work to these wages that basically they're going to make in whatever they're going to pay people in whatever other country they were going to. It's like, that's insane. So we need to have something built into the system that de-incentivizes that type of behavior and attitude with corporations. I mean, I understand with capitalism and maximizing profits, but there's nothing that says that you have to maximize at the greatest ability possible to the detriment of the people that you're allegedly supposed to be providing and serving. So I think that's a great conversation that we do need to maybe pull together a panel, even. I'm sure Nick, with all his economic expertise, would love to get in on that. But I appreciate Wendy for calling in, and I actually couldn't hear a little bit, but I know it was fire because Wendy's always fire.